Hello and welcome back. My name is Kate. I'll be your narrator for this video. I will be continuing from Bloodlines, Chupacabra, Chapter 2, Segment 1. If you tuned in previously, we left off as the four campers had now engaged with their guide while he was about to start his tale. We encountered several interruptions, but now this is where the story really starts. Chapter 2, Chills the Bones. A few hours before midnight, and all were now drinking up a hot cup of cocoa when a sick, eerie howling broke through the night air, sending chills down their spines. Sandra wasn't buying it. You're going to tell me that's a coyote? Definitely not a wolf either, is it? Laura, however, was a bit apprehensive. No, wolves don't sound like that, and that's no coyote. Well, what else could it be, Miss Wildlife Expert? As Sandra shoots a little snark back at Laura, annoyed. Well, I can't think of anything else it could be, but it has to be a coyote, says Laura as she gives Sandra a look irritated at her attitude. Are you sure that you really want to hear the rest of this story, or are you going to debate? Larry, by now a bit impatient as the girls argue with one another. With all eyes upon him now, the man clears his throat and speaks up as he looks at three terrified faces, searching for an answer to what it is out there alone in the dark. You're all right to be frightened, and I may have sensed it, but didn't want to alarm anyone, says Cal, chuckling a bit at the ridiculousness of the two women. He clasps his hands in front of him, eyes on the ground, then puts both palms on his knees, looks up and says, I heard stories told by the adults in my family about strange things that happen out here. Like what, pray tell, because I'd rather know than not. Mostly just curious over here, says Sandra, as she wraps her arms around her knees. Laura, I'm not sure if I want to. She wrapped the blanket around her knees tighter together. Well then, says Sandra, go to bed. I definitely want to hear the rest of this story. Laura, now fully irritated with Sandra's jabs. Do not tell me what to do, but I am entitled to my feeling on this, and I feel uneasy. There is always one, says Cal, rolls his eyes. You don't have to stay and listen. You can choose to go to bed, Laura. Laura wraps the blanket even tighter around herself and tries to get the courage to keep listening in to Larry, even if it is not real. Well, my grandfather told us kids growing up about his dad, and everything from the supernatural to aliens and black-eyed kids. This entity we hear out there is not something that you want to mess with. Larry Call Me tried, but there was no getting the girls to settle. As the night went on, things escalated. What do you mean? Asked Sandra, Ranger Larry Whitfield. All right, well, my grandfather told me that when he was a teen, back in the days when you still did your own hunting and living out on farm, it was expected, in the middle of no man's land, mind you. In those days, it was pretty tough. Larry went on as the three campers are now huddled together, listening, eyes focused on the storyteller, as Ranger Larry Whitfield continues. Larry, wide-eyed, begins again. There is a beast that roams this area and has been known to prey on small animals, draining the life from them. Sandra lets out a snort. Ah, you're just pulling our legs. She hesitates with concern furrowing her brow. Right? Larry, sitting back, hands clasped, says, No tall tale, I'm afraid. It is the truth. My grandfather and his two brothers would hunt in and around those mountains over there, points out, not far from the farm they grew up on. A low moan in the shadows grew closer, as if whatever it was had taken to stalking the four of them, toying with them almost. Sandra lets out a yelp. Okay, what the fuck was that? Seriously, come on now, tell us. Laura is starting to get a little paranoid at this point. What do you think? It sure sounded like it was a hell of a lot closer than it was 2 hours ago. Did you drag us out here just to scare us? What kind of sick prank is this? Larry laughs. No, not like that at all. So just simmer down. Laura, okay, so tell us what it is. She looked discernible as her gaze on Larry had narrowed her eyes, as in total disbelief. As all leaned in closer to the fire, then lifting his head so slightly, meeting the campers' straight faces and met his eyes as he began to speak. The anticipation was intense. Well, go on then. Come on, let it out already, says Sandra, who by now is getting increasingly impatient. Then Larry began to speak in a soft, hushed tone. He let out a deep sigh, then began. Folks, if this becomes too much, I suggest you turn into your tents. I don't want to cause any nightmares, for what I am about to tell you can haunt the very life out of you. Cal lets out a slightly annoyed sigh. No offense, Larry, but I am getting kind of antsy here. I am a curious, plus not much really scares me. Please, go on. All right, all right, all right. Well, it started when my grandfather and his two brothers had been out hunting and fishing one afternoon in late spring. After returning from their hunt with a few rabbits they'd shot and catfish in hand from the pond, they headed back down a path along the creek and pond that lead back to their farm. My great-uncle had gone off towards the lake to relieve himself, without the others noticing he had gone towards the path leading back to the farm, urinating behind a large oak tree. Larry takes a moment to recollect. He looks up at the three campers for a brief moment, then continues on with his tale. Okay, so far this is okay? Laura tries to reassure herself to not look like a total wuss. You better buckle up, Miss Gray, it's just started. Sandra and Cal cross with Laura even more, so both say at the same time. Yeah, for goodness sakes, let him finish, Laura. Thank you kindly, you too, but please be kind. I'll get this going, try and be calm, okay? My grandfather called out to my uncle from where he had just been, behind the tree, and I remember my grandfather saying, he could hear Hi's brother off in the distance, calling to them both, kind of panicked. Well, when my grandfather and great-uncle got there, before them on the ground, as my great-uncle stood with his head down, looking at something on the ground, there, the three of them stood hovering around, what turned out to be a carcass. Laura figured that I figured living on a farm with wild animals, they'd be used to seeing things like that though, wouldn't they? Oh yes, Larry says. Yet they couldn't quite identify it at first. Actually, the carcass was quite mutilated by whatever animal had killed it, but then just left it. Not a rabbit or any wild animal they could figure. No, my grandfather's older brother then said that it had been a lamb as he leaned in to inspect it close. Probably wandered away from a herd grazing about on someone's farm. It wasn't ours. We had marked our cattle and sheep with a specific brand. But there aren't any farms out here, I mean, that I know of. How this could be true? If there is nothing but desert all around us, asked Sandra. Laura, still skeptical, thinks this is all just an old tale. Ah, he's just joshing us. Nothing but a tall tale to tell kids at a summer camp. No, Miss Gray, this I tell you is true. I stake my very life on it. What my grandfather found with his bothers that day. Why would he lie about something like that? And Laura, there are some farms in and near the towns. Just because it's not about this particular camping spot, you find yourself doubting it already? Sandra couldn't help herself. She knew that she could get Laura riled up a bit, Laura not wanting to give Sandra the satisfaction. It's not that I doubt it, but it seems a bit far-fetched, and that it had to be a coyote or a wild dog. I don't get the mystery. Cal chuffs. But how could have just been out in the middle of nowhere? I didn't think they would stray too far from their mothers. No, Mr. Newitt, they didn't. It was taken and then left on the banks of the lake where my grandfather and great-uncles had found it. You sure it wasn't just a coyote? Says Sandra. Larry looks at the nurse from Wisconsin. No, ma'am, it wasn't coyotes. They wouldn't have just up and left a kill like that. They would have scavenged the animal, sometimes eating bones and all. The three campers just shook their heads in disbelief. Cal was contemplating. I still think that it was a dead rabbit or something, probably just too decayed to identify. Larry said, it was a lamb. They had brought it home to bury it, so as the neighboring farm would accuse them of stealing their stock. Ranger Larry Whitfield now collected himself. He too was uncomfortable with the story, as is trembling as he tried to find the words. Cal thought, so it was a coyote then. They attack lambs and other small farm animals all of the time, don't they? No, Cal and I wish it had been a coyote or any other animal. Sorry to tell you all like this, but there is only one creature out here, out in this very desert, that would take a farm animal like a lamb and leave its kill. Laura wasn't buying any of this. That doesn't make any sense at all. Miss Gray, you don't understand, and the thing that caused that lamb's death was not just abandoning it. This animal was planning on returning to it and feeding on the lamb's last drop of blood. Cal looked a bit peaked as he said, Blood? What the fuck are you talking about? I guess there are bats out here too, but they are nocturnal and certainly do not attack small farm animals like that. In the pitch black of the evening, now approaching midnight, the mood amongst the group had become very ominous. Unease was setting in as Larry continued. Staring straight into the fire, his eyes seemed almost demonic, like the pit of hell opened up in his gaze. What he was about to say next would frighten even the hardest of men. Ranger Whitfield slowly lifted his head, his eyes meeting the women's and Cal's faces and looking straight into their eyes. I swear on my father and grandfather, it is and was a chupacabra, folks. All three campers now looking at Ranger Whitfield, the Sandra and Cal letting out a roar of laughter. Laura shrinking back into her chair once again, furrowing her brow. Cal looks at Larry with a stern face, then laughs. You got me. Great story. I actually believed it up until that point. You almost had us there, Larry. She throws her head back a bit and chuckles while slapping her leg and really believing that he was pulling their legs, says Sandra. Larry looking almost irritated. This is no laughing matter, ladies. I'm very serious. What happened next is no joke at all. Laura rolls her eyes at him as she still wasn't buying it. Laura, I call bullshit. Chupacabra is nothing more than a tale told to children to scare them into behaving by adults and children. Sandra shot back at her. I'm not so sure, she says to the Laura. He doesn't look like he is kidding. Then what about all of those news reports in Texas and Puerto Rico of animals drained of blood, missing heads off chickens and their throats ripped out? Huh, says Cal sharply. Sandra blurts out, exactly, looks at Laura. So what do you have to say about that? Laura crosses her arms in protest. I don't know, but we are out here in the dark, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and he's over there spinning tales about blood-sucking monsters. I mean, come on. As the night wears on, things start to take an argumentative turn over the discussion of an elusive cryptid. Laura believes that fairy tales and ghost stories are simply an illusion or mind tricks. She reaches down in her backpack, retrieving what appears to be a holy Bible, to the group's dismay, passing her off as just being ridiculous.